Greetings all. I'm Edward Polachek, Artistic Director for Concert Artists of Baltimore, and I trust that everyone has enjoyed the holiday season over the past several weeks, and I'll take this opportunity to wish us all peace and health and happiness in the new year. 13 ought to be a very lucky year for all of us. And I'm here today with Professor Ernest Liotti, Peabody faculty member and longtime friend, brilliant conversationalist, lecturer, musician who has agreed to become part of our concert artist family this particular season, where we have inaugurated a new series, the Lyceum series, and it's really conversations about music in some of the most beautiful venues here in Mount Vernon, in which we are seated today. I'd like to welcome you to check out the website where you can find out more about our Lyceum series. We have an event coming up on January 6th, Sunday afternoon at 3:30. That is really conversations about 20th century music, where American music comes of age. And rather than my going on about something that I cannot talk about, that I'm much better conducting than I am talking about, I'd like to bring Ernest into this conversation. Welcome, Ernest.
Thank you very much, Ed. I'm curious. I always thought that I would like to live long enough in the new century to see who of the 20th century would survive in standard repertoire.
Yes.
And I noticed that you've programmed some very interesting pieces, particularly the American pieces. As you said just a moment ago, I think we as a culture came into our own in the 20th century.
Absolutely.
And one of the composers that I've always admired going back is Billings, who was really our first American composer, but still very much European influenced.
Well, so many of our early American
Yes.
composers had that Western tradition, European influence
Yes.
on them. McDowell, Griffiths, some of those that early on, going from the 1800s into the 1900s. The Billings, I guess, other than Ben Franklin, would probably be considered one of, as you said, one of our first. I haven't in many years actually, and it's this gives me an idea for next season. Done any of that early American choral music.
Right.
Billings was so famous.
Wonderful stuff. Also, I always felt that we sort of had almost an inferiority complex as a culture musically. That if you were going to make it, you had to go to Europe to study. I mean, Copland did, Bernstein did, and maybe even up to the Second World War, and then all of a sudden.
I think even probably a little beyond that, because
okay.
I think the I don't know, the hangovers, you might say, of the influences of people like Nadia Boulanger were still there in Europe, and I think that Europe, even to this day, doesn't maintain a kind of magnet for, because it was what was the cradle of Western civilization in that sense. But I think the shift then somewhere after that did happen to come into this country, probably, and I'm not sure about this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I would think because mainly of technology, the way we developed in how we wrote things, the actual just sound, we shift from, in this country, from acoustical instruments into electronic instruments, and then the great strides that happened in recording itself, so that, in a sense, and I'm not so sure that all of this is very positive, because one of the things that really gets my goat is that we are so trained now to hear music through recording, and it's really through technology, which was a great way to spread the gospel of music to the general populace. But what it's done is it's trained the ears of our listeners to a certain thing that they don't hear in live performance now. And that could be just as great as it can be damning.
Totally aside. I teach two classes, great singers of the past, great pianists of the past. In the very first session, we go to the recording studio at Peabody, where Ed Tetreault shows us everything from wax cylinder up to the digital age, and they just take it for granted that everything's going to be recorded for them.
Did we do wax cylinders at Peabody?
Yes. I think my degree recital was on a wax cylinder.
But
My
first concert was yeah.
And now, of course, with all of the earbud things, I've had students come and listen to music on my stereo system, which is 30 years old, and music needs space. You can't just hear it through the ears.
This whole concept of music, the need for music in space, reminds me of the fact that there is no substitute for live performances.
I was curious about the program that you've chosen for the 12th of January. You have one of my favorite pieces, and that's the Barber Adagio for strings. And I think Barber is an underappreciated composer and often maligned more in his time because he was, quote, romantic. But I find nothing wrong with being able to write a melody.
Well, the interesting thing about what you just said is that that is all true about Barber. However, Barber, and like any great composer, found his niche. He found his musical language. And when you hear the music of Barber, you say, it cannot be anybody else. It is the music of Samuel Barber.
Exactly.
And I think that that's what is so, markedly, that sets aside or sets apart great composers from one another. That it's not just derivative. Mm-hmm. It could be neo-romantic. It could be, peppered with 20th century, 21st century harmonies. It could have this jazzy thing. It could have this American thing. It could have this. But if he or she develops his own language, which Barber did,
yes,
that's what makes him or her great.
So you think Barber will continue to be recognized?
Absolutely, and there's no question in my mind anyway. And I don't think that he's going to be the one-hit wonder the way like a Karl Orff would,
right,
or
right.
Offenbach, or somebody who we know from that one piece. His Adagio, which comes from his string quartet, Opus
yes.
11, will probably be forever ensconced as one of the great pieces of music ever written. But I think that there is so much more and people are going to, the general public is probably going to rediscover Barber
yes.
in the next 10 or 15 years.
The interesting thing that I always found about the Adagio is that it was championed by Toscanini.
That's right.
And it was Barber who won the Prix de Rome, I think it was 1936.
Correct.
And he brought Toscanini some manuscripts, and he saw this slow movement of the string quartet and encouraged him to write it for string orchestra. And how many people know the string quartet of Barber? Everybody knows the Adagio.
When he premiered it and it was broadcast, they got the most number of phone calls on the Barber Adagio than they had ever had before.
Interesting.
It garnered the biggest,
yeah.
the biggest amount of reaction from the general.
Well, and he recorded it in 1942,
right.
and it's funny. He always had that reputation of not promoting new music, but Toscanini, as you well know, premiered many works. They just happened to be living composers at the time of the 19th
which
century.
Were contemporary
which were
for him.
contemporary.
Right.
But during the Second World War, I mean, I have a recording of Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue with Earl Wilde and Benny Goodman.
Oh my God.
The Concerto in F. I mean, this is with Toscanini conducting the Concerto in F with Oscar Wilde. Can you imagine Toscanini? Not Oscar Wilde. Sorry, cut. Oscar Levant.
Oscar Levant.
With Oscar Levant. That's going to be taken out. You talked earlier about who of the 20th century would be in the standard repertoire of the 21st century and beyond. Mm-hmm. And I certainly think Copland will be remembered. It's interesting that Copland almost spanned the entire 20th century. He was born in 1900 and died in 1990. The same year Bernstein died, which was interesting.
Bernstein was 1911, I believe. So
1918. 1918, I believe.
So he was, of course, younger, but they were very close friends.
They were very close friends. And I think Copland probably had a strong influence on all American composers that followed.
I agree.
And the how Copland's music changed, and apparently in some of his earlier works he was going more towards the atonality, and then realized that he had lost an audience, and that's when some of the great works came in, like Rodeo, and certainly, of course, Appalachian Spring, which was a commission by Martha Graham. And I have a video of Martha Graham dancing it almost at the age of 60. And still playing the ingenue. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Wow. With February 6th coming up and the conversations that you're giving on chamber music.
Correct.
Even in the final conversations in May are about
Toscanini, exactly,
Living legend.
exactly.
This is why I'm wanting to encourage all of you folks who are witnessing this taping session to consider strongly this Lyceum series. We're very excited about this with Concert Artists. It's a new aspect of the organization, and we're really very blessed and very fortunate to have Ernest Liati be the one to introduce, to inaugurate this series for us. I like this
I do too. Yeah.
this setup. I would like to do more of these kinds of conversations.
Absolutely.
With you. I'm doing it.
So please join us for the second of a series of 6 conversations on music. January the 6th at 3:30 p.m., American Music Comes of Age in the 20th Century. For ticket information, go to www.cabbalto.org/tickets.